Welcome to Marketing MASH, brought to you by themarketingscope.com.
Today we have Shelly Kramer, CEO of V3 BroadSuite, a woman who needs no introduction in the civilized social media world.
Please.
That is now your new intro.
Top 50 social media info.
Yes. Congratulations,
Whatever.
Shelly. Top 10, top 50 list again as usual.
Yeah, thanks. It's so important. Those lists, they're so important.
Glad you made that.
You're not only on the list, but you're also someone who's in the trenches making things happen. And so we appreciate you. And then there's Daniel Newman. He didn't make this latest list, but he's on all the other lists. And he is a contributing writer for Forbes, Marketing Scope, Entrepreneur, Chimichanga.com, and co-CEO of V3 BroadSuite as well. And so I'm Eric Vidal. I'm with the Marketing Scope. I'm the editor and chief content officer. And today we're going to talk about the misrepresentation of news via social media, especially on Facebook. And Dan, I know you're chomping the bit to get to this most recent one, but this is not uncommon. I mean, just 2 days ago, and I don't even know if I want to go into this. I mentioned I'm Latino, but some of these posts about what the LA Times had said about different Mexican Americans or illegal Mexicans and different things that were way off. I mean, on Facebook, LA Times didn't say anything about this, but because one person put a post in a visual and said LA Times, said this and that, no one checks sources, right? What about, a while back, you guys remember the woman who had the plastic surgery to have a third boob put on? That wasn't true as well, right? Somebody just doctored a picture and that became real. Or was it the other one, the iPhone 6, that if you put the iPhone 6 in a microwave, it will help charge it? Obviously that's not true. And some people found out the hard way, but sometimes it's as easy as Googling or just doing a basic search, 10 seconds, 30 seconds.
Time.
Yeah. And so,
takes time.
but the people who blindly just share or post or blindly just share some of these articles, it just drives me crazy, especially when it's from, they're not citing any of their sources, or it's not a legit news organization. It's from a friend, or if it's one of these cuckoo organizations, if you will. I'm sorry, not cuckoo, an organization. But Dan, why don't you give us the latest and greatest hot off the wire? I know the thing with the Facebook dislike button.
Well, I shared a post about a giant squid once, and I was sure it was real. I think it was like a 700-pound squid.
That's different.
But there's a lot of those Snopes posts where people verify on Snopes that it's not real.
Hi, Brian.
Hello.
Fanzo
every day, right? So was it Jimmy Kimmel or Fallon the other day? I shared a post about Jimmy Kimmel or Fallon that did the iPhone. They ran around the iPhone 4, told everybody it was the new iPhone 6S, and that people all were saying how much they love it and how much better it was than the old iPhone.
It fits in my hand. It's lighter.
They were playing with a 4-year-old iPhone, and people couldn't even tell the difference. But because they were running around on camera, everybody was willing to just get excited about it. So, it shows a sort of a brain chemistry issue that's going on. But what sort of inspired me to have this, you call it a fun talk, but I think it's a very real talk too, about an issue that's going on is as companies are expanding more and more into content and creating rapid content and volumes of content, we're not verifying what we're reading. We're using things as sources without any validation of it, any verification. Major news outlets. So yeah, let's talk about this. Yesterday, right, this whole Facebook dislike button got announced, right? And I think it started because Zuckerberg used it in something he was talking about, but contextually what he was saying was an empathy button. When somebody says, my father is sick and in the hospital today, please send me your condolences. Someone can say, I dislike that your father's sick. I empathize with you that your father's sick. Not, I dislike another picture of Dan Newman's giant head on a Blab and they can make fun of you with it, right? And so, but everyone was sharing it and starting to look immediately into implications of that, implications of how people could troll on Facebook using the dislike button, and how people's opinions are going to shift and how people are going to become more concerned about what they post because they're going to be worried about people hitting the dislike button instead of just ignoring it. And it just really got me to thinking, we're in a very volatile place right now with so much content being shared, that if we don't start to pay attention to the sources, the quality, the research, the validity, we're all going to be running around, stating off facts that are basically complete crap. And you could put that in a meme and just put Abraham Lincoln under it, and then it will be true.
But, I don't disagree with you, but I don't think this is necessarily like a new phenomenon. I think that people are lazy. Some things are, my husband and I joke about this all the time. There are two things that are true. People are stupid and they're everywhere. And I'm not trying to sound like an elitist, but there are a lot of stupid people, and we are essentially lazy as can be. And the internet and social media channels make us even lazier. And so, all the time, people post things, and people, I do this all the time. I'll share something on Facebook that's maybe it's a pretty in-depth article, and a whole conversations ensue that make it 100% clear that nobody's read the article. And, shut the hell up if you haven't read the article. Don't give an opinion based on a headline. And that's what's happening with this Facebook business. It's people are seeing headlines. They're lazy. They don't want to click through and see what's actually going on, because if you read any one of the hundreds of articles out there or watch any of the conversations that are going on about the Facebook, empathy button or whatever, you'll know in a second there would never be a dislike button, and so it's just frustrating. But I don't think this is new. I think that, we've been a society that's been, rumor mongers and lazy for a really long time. And you might just glimpse a headline in a newspaper back in the day and share that and, and act like you're informed or whatever. So I don't think this is a new phenomenon. I think the danger is there's more reputational danger for any of us if we don't take time to read the information that's shared before we share an opinion, to read the information that's shared before we agree with it, to read something that's shared before we include a comment on it or anything else. So I don't think it's new, but I think that I think there's a greater damage, especially for those of us, like everybody participating here, who is active and has a presence in the online space. You have to pay attention to your sources. You have to pay attention to who you agree with. You have to pay attention to who you have relationships with, and who
Shelly,
you endorse.
Ain't nobody got time for that, Shelly.
Shelly, I agree with you 100%. And it's interesting that you brought this up, something that's a bigger issue outside of social media in general, right? Because if you go back, a year or two ago, or even 3 or 4 years ago, I came from the brand side, and I was on the brand. I was talking to the media all the time, trying to explain the market we were in, or some new things going on with our product, or something interesting things that were going on with our customers, and trying to get them to write about us, right? Or they would reach out to us or to me for a quote. But what I noticed over the last few years, mainline media even, they wouldn't check. They wouldn't check.
Right.
And I'm not talking about 20% of the time or 10% of the time. It was a big chunk of the time. More than 50% of the time, they would not check. And I could throw out, 52%. I could have, because I remember I said, hold on, here's a number, but let me double check. I'll get back to you. The woman, 8 hours later posted the story, and I got back to her and said, hey, it was off. I was off by 12%. And she said, don't worry about it. It's okay.
Nobody pays attention to those little details anyway. Accuracy,
but I'm just saying,
facts.
I could have said anything. And I think it's to the point where I think folks in the general media, they're understaffed. It wasn't like it was 20 years ago, and they're competing with all these bloggers and online people, and they have to get stuff out, and they have to get, and people don't check. They don't check their sources like they used to.
The only thing I would add to Shelly's comment, I would add the third thing: you can't fix stupid, right? People are stupid. You can't fix it. The fact, social amplifies so much good and so much community and so much awesomeness, but it also amplifies stupid, and it also amplifies lazy, and it amplifies hate and all of this, but the nice part about it, which I like better than offline, right? If you have to deal with a bully that's in your neighborhood or bully at your local, at your local event place, unfortunately, you can't just, poof and they're gone. But, part of it is, how do you together amplify the people that are doing good crap and ignore, block, unfollow those that are doing the bad stuff, right? And I think that's, part of it for me. I'm a big fan of, when you fool me once, okay, shame on me. Fool me twice, I unfollow, block. I don't add you to my content stream. I'm stop following your crap because you're just spewing nonsense to begin with. So I think that's part of the culture that we're living in. I think we have to teach each other and kind of step up for each other as well to say, hey, how do we together kind of rid each other from this nonsense? Like, Daniel and I were even talking about that dislike button when we were together in New York, and the both of us looked at each other like, have you read anything on it? And we're like, nope. And like we both laughed like, oh, that'd be interesting. And we made like 2 comments, but neither one of us like went into in depth because neither one of us had read anything enough to know if it was true or not. But at the same time, we could easily post it on anybody or shared anybody else's quote unquote trusted resource and kind of looked like a fool. But hopefully, I think we're being a little bit better in that. And I think it's the same thing. So many people share content, to your point, Shelly. It's amazing how many people comment or share a post, especially on Facebook, that they've never read. And they'll comment and like have all this angle. And I'll be like, did you read the first paragraph? Like you just took the title and went on your own rant without even reading. How dare, and I think that's just, it's lazy.
Hey, Fanzo, you brought up one thing about hate. I mean, and maybe I'm naive here, guys, but social media is, I just didn't know that there was that much hate out there towards just certain types of people, even some of the racial stuff. I just see that on or on, social media.
It's out the worst in people.
Yeah, and it gets amplified.
Haven't you ever even gone to your local TV station's Facebook page or your local newspaper's online paper and read the comments that people leave? I mean, go to YouTube, read the comments. I mean, there are horrible examples of humanity walking around. And again, the internet and anonymity facilitates that. So yeah, there's hate. Yeah, there's bias. Yeah, there's racial prejudice. I mean, there's everything you can imagine times a million. And the internet facilitates that.
Keyboard muscles and the more anonymous, you go to Yahoo comments and they're even nastier than Facebook comments. But you'll see a Facebook person that'll post to like a major brand where there's no relationship or engagement, and they'll gladly say the most hate spewing things in the world. I posted about that. It's like, I don't know why there's that need that people have to take things to the next level. I always try to think like, if I run into this person face to face, would I say what I'm saying right now? Would I say that? Because maybe in that case, I actually would. But so I want to mention something going back to this whole thing about sharing stuff. Probably one of the worst kept secrets of people who are successful in social media is that they don't read everything they share. And, you look at my stream, I'll be the first to admit I share 100 things a day on Twitter. I do not thoroughly view everything I share. I have picked sources that I believe are very trustworthy, people, bloggers, writers, media outlets that I think have good content, and I've definitely read a lot of their content, but there's no way you could share 100 articles a day and read it and actually get any work done. There's no way you could share the amount of stuff we share on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter all day long and actually be running anything, a business or leading a company. But we share a lot because part of thought leadership, right? Part of actually getting out there is that constant sharing, because you're competing with thousands, forget it, millions of people sharing content. So this is a bigger problem in that aspect. Is we become trusted experts in areas. We're a trusted expert in social media, right? 2 of the 4 of us, not me and not you, Eric, are considered top data-driven influencers in the social media space, according to a report that came out yesterday. That's based on people using social media and social media marketing in their content. And you guys have become trusted experts. So Brian and Shelly, I'll let you guys respond to this. You guys share a lot of stuff, and I have every confidence that you vet your sources and you know what you're doing. But I think you would be lying to me if you said you've read every single post you've ever shared on social media. So, like I said, yesterday's was just one example of an article that got spawned out of control on social media because a couple trusted sources shared it, and then everybody ran with it.
Well, and I think I will say this, I don't read every single word of every single piece of content I share. Although I'm a voracious reader, I consume things very quickly, and I rarely share anything without scanning it and really, kind of best practices of any kind of content writing. I understand the headline, I understand the subheads, I understand the key point. But, a lot of times too, when I share things, and I tend to not say things like, I absolutely believe in this. I tend to share things and think, this is interesting. What do you guys think?
I noticed that about you, Shelly.
But because I don't want to ram my opinions down anybody's throat, and I am very respectful of people in that way. But I think also people, and I can't speak for Brian, but I think, people like me who have been in the online space for a really long time and who have established really large follower bases, I think what else that we do is we tend to have built relationships with people that we know very, very well. And, Dan, I might not agree with 100% of what you write or what you think or whatever, but I am comfortable if I see a piece of content. I mean, you happen to be my business partner, but before you were my business partner, if I happen to see a piece of content that somebody that's a trusted friend and has been for a long time, whose content I've regularly read, I can feel pretty confident in sharing it that it's not a crazy person, or it's not something I'm going to 100% disagree with. But I will say that I do not ever leave comments on content that is shared without reading the content, because A, I'm not an idiot, and B, I don't want to look like an idiot. And so I'm not going to contribute to a conversation without making sure I have the facts. So I think, I do consume the content that I share as much as humanly possible. I don't read everything. I rely on a group of trusted sources, which can be dangerous in and of itself. Brian, what about you?
No, I think it's a great point. I actually like the caveat with it's the difference between a retweet and a quote retweet on Twitter. Because if I retweet something, it's something I'm like, oh, I think my audience might be interested in this.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily validating or referencing that the post is there. But if I quote retweet and add my own insight, like must read, this is interesting, like, wow, you guys should check this out, I guarantee I read every one of those. Like, so for me, that's kind of where I kind of separate it, in the point where, in kind of what you were saying, Shelly, if I'm adding my own substance to it, or I'm caveating, or even putting my own name and reputation on the line for sharing something, I am reading it. But there is an element of trusted resource. And I know, Daniel, even the idea of Triber, right? There's a little bit of Triber that I love, and there's a little bit of Triber that scared me. But it's an idea that you can follow people where you get everybody's blogs and all in one. For those that don't know Triber, it's a social network for bloggers to share bloggers' content. But the nice part about it is you can choose to auto share everybody's content, or you could choose to auto see everybody's RSS feed and then decide exactly what you want to share. So I think the idea of auto sharing every single post of somebody is a little bit scary, because some people write on a certain topic, and then all of a sudden they decide to rant on how bad the social media marketing world is and the fact that's going across all my channels. That does scare the crap out of me. But I kind of look at it a lot too, and I use Flipboard a lot. So I'll actually flip something to Flipboard, and I might retweet on Twitter. But then if you see it on LinkedIn and it has my opinion on a paragraph on it about the post, the difference was I flipped it to Flipboard, waited till at night, then I read the content, then I actually had an opinion, and then I added to it on LinkedIn. So I think the workflow for that is interesting, but there is to actually not only validate, but read every single piece of content we're sharing, especially sharing at a high pace.
I hate curate everything, but here's a question for you guys, right? A lot of brand people will put opinions are my own, right? Or they put things like that in their bios, right? Things shared are my own. They're not my company's opinion. And I've said for the longest time that you're associated with every brand, every community, everything you associate yourself with, the content you create and share will directly or indirectly affect that company, that community, that not-for-profit, that group, organization, sports team, whatever you're a part of. And we've seen it happen. That's why people get fired over saying stupid stuff on social media. People used to put that as like a blanket statement to say whatever they wanted on social. But having said that, my point is you said, Brian, what you just said, and I'm not disagreeing, because like I said, I'm guilty of sharing. I have people I trust, and that's how I use Triber. That's how I use Buffer. I have sources and people I trust. I try to scan a lot of what I share. I try to help people and friends, though. That's another secret of social media. Yeah. We have our friends and we help each other. We amplify each other's content because it's noisy out there. But when you retweet, it's very hard, just because we feel like we're not advocating for the content we've retweeted or shared because we didn't, justify or specify that. I can't tell you, over the years, it's maybe a dozen times, Brian, but probably a few times people have commented on something I've retweeted. Like, did you read this article, or did you actually did you see this data? It's crap or it's wrong. People have come after me because I've retweeted it and they've gone, oh, Dan shared it. I'm going to read this. They've read this and then they've come back at me. So that's what I'm saying is like, just because we think that big disclaimer gets us away from
that, that disclaimer does nothing. And any person who thinks that using that disclaimer when you work for a brand, it protects the brand. Any brand that thinks that protects them is an idiot, because it doesn't do anything. Absolutely nothing. As long as you're being paid by a company and you have a presence online and you're affiliated in some way with that company, that disclaimer does nothing.
Well, Dan, going back to what you said, I remember social media early days where, back in 2009 and 10, when a lot of people were posting a lot of content, not personal content, but content, educational content on Facebook, obviously Twitter, but I had some coworkers at Cisco that were big in Twitter and Facebook, and they'd always follow, and I'd follow. We were following each other, but they post these articles, and it was content that I'm really interested in. So I would make a comment. Hey, that was very interesting, paragraph 2, and let's talk about that. Or what do you think? I think this, and it just go dead. They're just posting content to post content. I used to be my biggest pet peeve. I'm over it now, but back in the day, it was a big pet peeve for me.
Yeah, no, I think you make a great point, Eric. I thought it was important to point that out. I think it's just this is just one of those really hard things. And yesterday's example really proliferated it in my mind. It's like I said, the iPhone thing with Jimmy Kimmel, or was it Fallon? Somebody correct me.
It was Fallon. By the way, I think he does that every time. Every single time a new one comes out, he does that. So,
right. But every single time, everybody goes, oh my God, this is great. But what does this say about us as a society? I have at least one time a week that there's an idiocracy post due in my stream that we are going that way, that all this tech and all this data, and we are getting dumber and dumber and dumber.
Well, let me ask a question to all of you, because I've recently chosen, well, not recently, I've been doing it for a while, but I can't jump on a post or make a comment if there's some hate in there. If I've already seen some hate, or if I've made a comment and I see something coming in where people just have these outrageous kind of views, I get myself off it now, and I don't jump into that conversation because I'm not going to change their mind. They have it, and there's Shelly, I'll bring you up because you're very good at it. I think you just a nice way you dance around it, and and you make a comment like, hey, there's interesting views, but then you try to maybe give another comment back. But I mean, there's other people like our friend Olivier. He just comes back and he will make his point, and I love it. I love reading it, but I just stand back and just watch. But I mean, I'm curious. I'll start with you, Shelly.
But Eric, I think this is a personality thing, and I think the vast majority of people would rather not have any part in conversations that are even remotely unpleasant. And I think also it's fairly fair to say, and again, our audience is comprised here mostly of people who are no strangers to the online space. So we're a different group in and of ourselves. But the number of people who are willing to stand up and say, here's what I think about this social issue. Here's what I think about gun control. Here's what I think about this. Those people are a very small group of people. And while I may be somebody who is not reluctant to share my opinions, and I also kind of feel like I'm old enough, I'm experienced enough, I've tried to be educated enough that when I share my opinions on something, I try to do it respectfully. I'm pretty passionate about certain things, but you know what? I mean, I shared something on gun control the other day, and I think that our situation is out of control when when the school shooting happens in America every day, every week, and we just go, or we think, oh wow, sure hope that doesn't happen at my school, and I can't really care about anything else. I just care that it doesn't happen at my school. I mean, tell me you haven't all thought this. You all have kids, right? And we send our kids off to school every day, and people show up with guns. But anyway, so I shared something about gun control, and one of my friends that I went to high school with shared a response that he lives in Arizona, he has a weapon, it's illegal to carry it, he's not pro weapons, he's pro protection, and he served in the military. I'm sure he knows how to use his gun. And you know what? He has but this is the difference. He is, and people in that conversation kind of started to jump on him and, you really think that? And, just like we get all, let's punch each other. And, what I said to him is, you know what, Robert, I absolutely respect your opinion. I absolutely respect you have a right to carry a gun. It's the law. But, I think that the way that we solve these social issues, and these are big social issues, is that we have to find a way to have conversations with each other about this stuff. Whether we're having them on Facebook, whether we're having them here, whether we're having them in person. The same thing is true about political discussions. I mean, we got crazy stuff going on. But if we can't talk about this stuff without wanting to punch each other or without taking the largest amount of lowest blows possible, I think that's a problem. So I think there's a happy medium in there. And you see people online who have the ability to do that. And you see people online who only have the ability to think about and share and care about their own.
But do we ever make progress, Shelly? I mean, I got to ask, your opinions, like Brian, Shelly, Eric. Have you ever been swayed? And someone's belligerent or even well-educated responses to political.
I haven't on Facebook. I have in person. In person, I have.
But again, Dan, that's a personality thing. Because some people have their own opinion, and that's it, and they're intractable. And my personality is such that I'm always, I'm going to listen to what you have to say. And I have been swayed on an issue. I'll tell you something. This whole clock boy thing that we were all talking about so much yesterday, and it's a terrible thing. I can't imagine what it would be like to send my kid to school excited because he made a clock and have him end up being arrested. I mean, that would be terrible. But there was an article that was shared that I shared on Facebook. I don't know if you happen to read it, but it was talking about, we are so quick to jump on this bandwagon, and the president tweeted him, and Mark Zuckerberg tweeted him, and everybody wants this kid to be their kid, and isn't this look at this racism, and it's so terrible. But what this article shared was that this may be not as much a racist issue as you think it is, because here are 5 other instances of things that happened with children who were white. Okay, so a kid that went to school and went like this and got suspended because he made a gun with his finger, and things like that. So my point was, here all of us were jumping on the clock bandwagon, and here was a different point of view that, maybe there is some racism, but maybe it's a bigger issue that we've become so, because of all the things that have happened in our schools, we've become hyper vigilant. So maybe that's the problem. And maybe it's that much of an issue as it is a racial issue. So yes, absolutely, I can be swayed, but I think that's a personality issue. I don't think it's a channel issue.
But it might have something to do.
That's a good point.
With delivery too. I mean, I'm just saying, like, Brian, you might be good at commenting on this because I know how you are. When people get a little feisty, you don't like to get in the you kind of, that's what you said, you block, you get rid of when people show negativity consistently, even when it might, maybe they have a point, but it's just like, you'd rather not get into it because it's just not the place. The public forum may not be the place, may not want to be known for being in the, like for me, I would have a conversation with just about anybody in my social media network, 1-to-1 over a beer about politics, about finances, about religion. But chances are I'll never interject my opinion online just because of the fact of the misinterpretations, contextualization. The written word has huge contextualization implications. That was a big word combination there, by the way.
I'm proud of you, Dan. I'm proud of you.
But because what I'm saying is I can't tell you how often I text something to somebody, or like, Shelly, you and I have had exchanges where we text each other and I think you're mad at me about something and you're just sharing information.
I'm never mad at you.
Shelly, by the way,
the point is,
same thing happens with me, Shelly. He thinks I'm mad at him or something.
I don't actually care. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But no, I totally get it. But I'm saying, like, you can't read text that way. You can't read text that way. You don't really know. Like, Brian, same thing. We've had things go back and forth where it's like, is he upset? Is he happy? Is he just sharing? What is in? It's like, just call me. But we're all so into text and writing and blogs and sharing that way that we miss it. And as we're hearing in the stream, this is no body language or voice inflection. I think that's a great point there. the written word does that. And that's what I mean is like someone might share something and think they're being funny, like, haha, like about the clock. Like I shared something because I thought it was funny that they showed Big Ben and they're like, student in London got arrested for bringing a clock to school that also is a rocket ship or something like that. And it was a picture of Big Ben. And the point is that's kind of funny. I don't necessarily have a political stance on the arrest or on the decision. I haven't read enough about it. See, we're back to the beginning. I haven't actually read enough about the whole situation to have an opinion. Right. But what I do know is that as a whole, people that would read into that might not know me or don't know me well are now immediately going to decide that I have a political opinion on this, that I'm on the side of that it was racism and that it was a negative thing, when actually I was just sharing something that I thought was kind of humorous.
So, I mean, from my standpoint, I kind of it's pretty easy for me. Like, I don't engage in arguments, but I love educated debates. And so I love someone that can see both sides. And although they have an opinion, hopefully they stick to their opinion because I think that's even more powerful. But I don't like someone that doesn't understand the other side or hasn't taken the time to learn about that, right? So like I was raised Catholic, but I've had a huge problem with people that take one side on religion without ever researching or understanding what the other religions are or why someone believes in what they believe. Same with the gun battle. I have a carry permit as myself, right? So I have a carry permit legally to carry my own arm because it's something that is granted to me. Someone that wants to argue about gun control that understands both sides of it but sticks on one side or the other, perfectly happy of engaging in debate. I actually love that. It's actually, but I can't stand, and it's, sports is like the epicenter, right? Because we could have bleed what our team is, and then we don't care whatever. Like I don't care if your team's won more games than me or anything. I still think my team's better, but everything besides sports, in my opinion, I really love to take a very kind of look at it and say, oh shit, I don't know your side well enough to even know if my side's correct. And I think that's the weird part. If you're not educated enough to do that, I think that's when these things get so weirdly out of hand. And hopefully, Daniel, to I guess the opposite of what happened, what you were asking. I mean, I think I'm swayed often on a lot of issues that I didn't really know enough to even know what the other side cared about. And I people post like my eyes, and I'm like, oh crap! Like I didn't even realize the other side thought that way. Maybe my side isn't as right, and maybe I'm close towards the middle. And I think that's how I look at a lot of posts. But also is a lot of people that share on social media that is so one-sided. They don't even care if the other side could be right or care enough to know about what the other side even is advocating. That those kind of things to me are just straight arguments. And I eject. I don't have time for it. For me, educate yourself on the other side and let's go back and forth. If not, I got better.
I mean, the world's not just black and white, and you need to work together. I mean, that's another thing. I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But going back to politics, Shelly, a lot different. A friend of mine, I have 2 or 3 friends that work in politics, and one of them says, talks about Ted Kennedy, about how they'd sit there in an argument with Republicans, but 20 minutes later, they're having lunch or they're having a cocktail, and they're working things out. Right? It's all about collaborating, working things out, and it's different times, it seems like, the last 10 or 20 years. But
well, we all have different views on different things, and just respecting that, I think, is important.
Respecting that, and
that's it's easy to be a butthead in social, and just keeping other people's. It's funny. I remember one time in the early days of social. I mean, this is a long time ago, and this is back in the days, if you remember, Follow Friday, where people used to kind of recommend people to follow. And one of my acquaintances included me in a list of people. And just out of curiosity, I clicked on the, other 4 or 5 people that she had included, and they were all people that were pretty conservative Christians. And that is really not how you would describe me. I mean, I tend to be a little bit more of a liberal Christian. And it was so funny because I said to her, I messaged her and I said, it was so interesting to see that because I'm so different. I mean, I'm really out there compared to all your friends. And she said, you know what, Shelly, that's how, your friendship with me keeps me balanced, because if the only people I ever talk to are people that think the exact same way that I do, then, my world's pretty homogenous. So you're in there to mix it up. And I thought that was actually a really nice compliment. So anyway.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we wrap up the podcast and then we can keep talking for a couple more minutes. But once again, everyone, thank you for joining our Marketing Mash today. Stay tuned for next week. We have somebody from Dell, and the week after we have somebody from Oracle. So we're going to have some good content coming up. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Marketing Mash. You can share your thoughts by following us on Twitter and Facebook. Subscribe to our podcast to keep up with the show. And of course, you can always find us by visiting themarketingscope.com.